farm. Do you guys remember that? Right? And what's the basic gist of Animal Farm? What was the basic gist of it? What's that? Some things are more equal than others. What else? What was another theme in Animal Farm? It's been a long time? Okay. So pick it up, read it at some point. But there was this whole conversation around the fact that some things are more equal than others, right? So that's where I'm going with this idea. Now, how many people, are there any folks like myself that eat organic food? Or who can appreciate organic food? Okay, cool. Has anyone ever noticed how expensive free-range chicken is? Right? Yeah, so free-range chicken is sometimes double the price or maybe even triple the price of conventional chicken. Does anybody know why? Okay, so it costs more to have them be free range. And what does that mean, free range? It means that they're not cooped up. It means what else? They're running around in the yard. Maybe. Okay, so no medicine. What else? Less infections, all that kind of stuff, right? So these chickens are running around free. They have access to grass and sunlight. You know, they live in drug-free communities. They have really nice gates, right, around their properties. So they have access. So they might have what we call privileges. We might say that these chickens have privileges.
That one will work, but the other one's got a dead battery.
Okay, so I'll keep it on. And so those free-range chickens are more expensive. They have better community life. They can be more social. They have access to lots of different resources. And then we get to the cage chickens. And the cage chickens, they're pretty inexpensive compared to the free-range chickens. And why is that? Why are they a bit less expensive than those free-range chickens? Because they're crammed and you can cram more into smaller spaces, right? What else? What's that? They're easier to care for.
Yeah, no one has to let them in or out.
Nobody has to let them in or out. What else?
They don't take up any land.
They don't take up as much land as the free-range chickens. What else?
More competition.
There's more competition. You can get them in tighter spaces. There's antibiotics that you can grow them faster, right? Because you can get a full-grown chicken in 46 days as opposed to a natural process that takes a little bit longer. And what is the situation like? What is the environment like for cage chickens? It's horrible, right? It's nasty. It stinks. They're cramped up. There's lots of trash in their yards. There's not a lot of green spaces where they are, and they're pecking each other. So they either have to cut off their beaks or give them chicken glasses so that they don't cannibalize themselves, so they don't commit black-on-black crime. So that they don't hurt people in their own chicken coop. But here's the funny thing about these privileges. So the free-range chickens have privilege. The cage chickens don't have the same privileges as the free-range chickens. But what's the problem in this metaphor of both the free-range chicken and the cage chicken? They're ultimately going to be served up. And so when we talk about this concept of white privilege, what we sometimes don't forget is that if we're being active in the game, if we use or have these privileges, they're not to benefit us, but they're to benefit the system. And at the end of the day, whether I'm rich or poor, whatever my racial or cultural background is, if I'm not conscious of how I'm behaving, I will still be served up at the end of the day. And so when we talk about this concept of privilege, those are the things that we have to keep in mind, whether it's white privilege or black privilege or whatever. To be quite honest, I have been in situations where my black brothers and sisters will give me something extra that they won't necessarily give a white person. And so that happens among groups. I'm not exactly sure why, but sometimes those are things you just can't refuse, because sometimes the pocket get tight. You're like, ooh, thank you for the extra fries, right? So that's something to think about and consider. And so the other part of that is that so we have those privileges, but on the backside of those privileges is this concept of internalized oppression. And internalized oppression is best summed up in the story of crabs in a bucket. Most folks are familiar with that concept, crabs in a bucket, right? So you put crabs in a bucket and you don't have to put a lid on, because as the crabs are trying to crawl out of the bucket, they pull down crabs that are in front of them. Ultimately, no crab escapes from the bucket is the metaphor of the story that goes along with that. And so when we have internalized oppression, what that means is that what the outside world has said about my ethnic group or about my cultural group or about my gender, not only do I believe it, but I become the standard or the individual who's going to make sure that oppression stands. And so we become hypercritical when we have internalized oppression of other folks. I am not a woman, but I am told that women can be so critical of other women in terms of what they dress, how they look, and blah, 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 when men don't even know the difference. Right? So, a lady will say, well, honey, how do you think? And the guy's like, oh, that's a great color. She's like, I don't like that color. But she's so concerned about what other women will say, because other women will be like, I can't believe she wore it that way. Right? When men were just like, oh, that looks nice, So when we're also hypercritical, we have a keen eye for what's wrong with folks, and we lack the grace to give folks to say, you know what? They're not doing it absolutely perfect, and that's okay. When we suffer from internalized oppression, we think people have to be perfect to meet our standards in whatever it is that they're doing. So why is it that the poor hippie folks, why are they not doing exactly this, and this? Because this is what hippies should be doing, blah, 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 blah. And we lack the grace to understand that we're all trying to be the best we can given what we have access to. So context becomes extremely important, and context is everything. So I use this example. In southern Minnesota is where most of the farming happens. And I don't know if you've been close to a farm or know anything about farming, but is there a certain knowledge base that farmers have to be successful? Okay, so what kinds of things do farmers have to be successful?
Weather knowledge.
They have to know about the weather. All right, what else?
About the soil.
They have to know about the soil. They have to know about the market. What else?
Diseases.
They have to know about diseases. They have to know about what? Workforce. About their workforce, right? They might have to know a little bit about chemistry, right? So if they're going to use a certain kind of fertilizer, or they need to know the pH balance of the soil. I mean, those are things that they have to know. The market, when to sell, how to sell, how to get it to the grain elevator, when to get it on that grain elevator, how to get it on the train. So it's a pretty, and if they have animals, they have to understand animal husbandry, right? They have to understand some basic veterinary things, and they have to have those big long gloves that they use to kind of help clean out the stomachs of cows and all sorts of sophisticated stuff they have to know. But what if I took a farmer from the farm and I placed them in downtown Manhattan? What would the people in Manhattan say about that farmer? They say he's a hayseed. What else? They call him a hick. They say he was backwards. They would say he's out of place. But what would happen if I took a person from New York and I put them on the farmer's land on their farm? What would the farmer then say about that New Yorker?
City slicker.
He's a city slicker. What else?
Stupid. He doesn't know anything.
He doesn't know anything. He's stupid. He's useless. Or he may go as far as to say what my grandfather would say about a dog that doesn't hunt. What do you do with a dog that doesn't hunt? You shoot it. No, I'm not saying, do any harm to animals or anything like that. That's just what my grandfather would say. But I do find it interesting that all of his dogs seem to run away. So context is everything. Context is everything. And so when we talk about people's ability to be themselves or to be competent, context becomes a large part of that. And so can a farmer figure out how to operate in New York? Yes, he can do that. He can figure it out, right? Can a New Yorker figure out how to operate on a farm? Ultimately, yes, he can, right? He can. So what is the gap between acclimation to the new context and your arrival in that context? Starts with T and ends in I'm. Time, right? So often we don't give people enough time, we don't give enough resources to acclimate, and we expect them. Know English in 3 months. When most of us speak it and still don't know English, right? Because there's always new words coming up, like cray-cray. I don't know if anybody has teenagers, cray-cray. It just means crazy, but I don't know why they don't just say crazy. They say cray-cray, right? Because it's not cool? Okay. And also, if you're over a certain age, you shouldn't use cool words, right? I think 30 is the cutoff. So once you get to 30, you cannot use cool words. And do not shop at H&M over 30. Just as I made that mistake once. I was way too hip for my age. All right. H&M is like a Gap kind of store for hip young kids. One of the things that is important, particularly when we talk about diversity conversations or cultural competence, is this idea of the Pygmalion effect. And are people familiar with Pygmalion, the story of Pygmalion? Right. So ultimately, what happens is a subject behaviors matches expectations. Authority forms expectations. Expectations affect authority's behaviors. Authority's behavior affects the subject, and the subject then has the matching behavior. Basically meaning, what I expect of you is what you'll rise to. Right? So I expect a certain thing of you, and even if you don't do it, that's what I will see from you, because that's what, A, I see, but secondly, you will try to rise to my expectation. A lot of times in schools and classes, or even in the nature of conflict, if we have an expectation of how someone will respond, we treat them that way, and we actually get that response from them. Right? And so we act as we think we are, and we also see in people what we expect to see in people. I don't know if you've ever had, a friend say something about a third person, and they're like, "Oh, that person's really cool," and you're like, "No, they're not," right? Because you've had a different experience with that person. So we'll continue on. Here's don't start yet. So here's a movie. It's about 5 minutes that I want to show that kind of talks about this Pygmalion effect. It also deals with our preconceived notions about folks and the legacy of that 101 year gap that people didn't have access to goods, jobs, and services in an equal way, and how that becomes problematic. All right? So I'll show that. And
Could you open the door?
Yep, I will. It's hot. Keep the door open.